Hi, students. So today we are going to talk about past perfect progressive tense, and it's just the fancy way or the technical way, meaning technical just means like the exact word, the exact way to talk about uh, a verb tense that's a past tense, but we're using the word had, and we're also using a progressive verb, right? The ing verb, the ing verb, walking, talking. So we use it to talk about action or actions that started in the past and they kept going until another time in the past. So it's talking about two actions in the past, right? So if this is the present and this is the past, you have two things happening. And when we use past perfect progressive tense, it means that one action kept happening and another one happened. And that's why we use it. So what is it? So past perfect tense, what we've learned before, what we learned yesterday or in the last lesson, I had eaten dinner before he called, right? So what we learned yesterday is here's the present, here's the past. I had eaten dinner and then he called, right? So it's talking about two different things in the past, two different actions that happened. I had eaten dinner, he called. And you had eaten dinner before he called. So that's past perfect tense. But when we use past perfect progressive tense, the sentence would be I had been eating dinner before he called. I had been eating dinner before he called. So you'll see that instead of saying eaten, we say been eating. We use a ing verb. Instead of saying eaten, we say eating. We use ing. And since we use ing verb, we know that when we use that verb in English, when we put an ing at the end, an ing sound, it means that that verb is continuous. It means that it is going to keep happening, or it was happening, right? So when we use the past perfect progressive tense, the focus of what we're talking about isn't that, or the focus of the sentence when we use it is that one action was happening when the other action happened. So you're having this action going on, but then you have another action going on. And both of those actions happened in the past. And that's why we use it. So how do I make this? How do you make this in English? You need a subject, right? You can use I, she, we, they, any of those. But you can also use like my dad or my friend or the desk or whatever. The subject is just a person, a place, or a thing. And then after you say the subject, you say had been or had been. Been, this word right here, been and being, it's the same word. It's just pronounced differently. So some people say, oh, I had been waiting, but some people say I had been waiting. It just depends on the person's accent. So you just need the subject, then you need to say had been, and then you use a verb that has the ing at the end. So I had been waiting. I had been waiting. She had been talking. Talking. She had been talking. We had been working. We had been working. So that's how you make it. So you'll see I have a couple sentences here. The bus had been running late the day I woke up late. So We have the subject, which is the bus, right? Then we said had been, and then we said running. The bus had been running late. And in English, when we say running, and we're talking about a machine, like a bus or a car, or like a computer, the computer had been running. Running, when we use it to talk about machines, it doesn't mean that they're like physically running, you know, like running. It means that it's on, it's working. So that's what we mean in English when we say, oh, this machine was running. The bus had been running late, meaning the bus had been working. It had been, right? It's a machine. It was working and it was getting to the bus stops late. So that's what it means when we say running and we talk about machines in English. But my husband had been working late, right? The subject, the person that we're talking about is my husband. And then we say had been, right, together. And then we say the verb we use is progressive, working. My husband had been working late. So what does it mean? When we use the past perfect progressive, when we use this verb tense, what we're focusing on is that we're talking to somebody. When we talk to people, we talk to them in the present, right? Like I'm teaching this lesson right now in the moment. That's what I'm doing right now. But when we want to talk about something from the past, we need to use past tense, right? But sometimes when we use like simple past tense or past progressive, like I was using the bathroom and they knocked on the door, it's harder to help people understand what order they happened. So that's why we use this tense, because when we use it, it means that, like I am showing in the pictures, you can be talking to somebody in the present and then be talking about something in the past, two things that happened in the past. I had been using the bathroom when they knocked on the door. So it's saying that I had been using the bathroom, meaning in the past, I was using the bathroom. It using, right? ING, using, it means that the action was happening. I had been using the bathroom. So this action is going on, it's happening. And then at the same time, somebody knocked on the door. So it's saying that when you use the progressive, when the past perfect progressive, instead of saying, oh, I had used the bathroom before they knocked on the door, that one is just saying these two things happened separately. This happened on its own, and then this happened on its own. But this tense, when we use this kind of wording, when we use this kind of sentence, when we say, I had been using the bathroom, it means that this action was going on when this action happened. So they happened at the same time, and one of them was going on, it was happening, right? It was a continuous thing when the other thing happened. So when we use it, it talks about two actions, right? 1, 2 in the past. So there are two actions that aren't happening right now, but they're actions that happened in the past. And it focuses on how one of the actions was continuing. It was a continuous verb, right? A continuous action when the second action happened. So they happen at the same time. So for example, in this sentence, I, which is a subject, had been driving, right? Continuous verb, to work when my son called. And we use had and been because they're both past tense. So these are the parts of the sentence that are telling us, okay, this is in the past, even though we're using a verb that we can use to talk about the present, right? The continuous. I had been, this is the part that tells us this is the past. I had been driving to work when my son called me. So I is the subject. It tells us who or what we're talking about. Had been tells us that it's the past. And driving, the verb, tells us that it was continuous, right? I had been driving to work when my son called me. So here's the present right here. This is in the moment right now as I'm talking to you. And this over here is the past. What we're talking about happened over here in the past. I had been driving to work, right? I had been, here, let me fix that so it says I had been driving to work, right? I had been driving to work, and that's continuous. It was something that kept on happening. But then it says, I had been driving to work when my son called me. So that means that while this action was happening, driving to work, my son called me. So that's what it's talking about, is it's saying this action is happening, and while this action was happening, this action kept happening, this action happened at the same time, at some point between the action happening. So I had been driving to work, so you're driving to work, and while you're driving, your son calls you. So I had been driving to work and my son called me. So it was at the same time when this action was happening. So that's, why we use it. Now we're going to just go over how to make them negative and how to make them into a question. So how you make it negative, the same as how we've been making it before, you just stick not in there. So instead of saying I had been sleeping, you say I had not been sleeping. So all we have to do is put the word not in between had right here and been. So we just put a not in between that. I had not been sleeping. And remember contractions, right? And I listed them here. I won't go over them again. You can just look at them and see if you remember them. But it's just, I had is I'd, she had, she'd, it had doesn't have a contraction. He had is he'd, we had, we'd, same thing. They had, they'd, these two are the same. You had, you'd, had not, hadn't, right? So that's how contractions work, right? We know this. So using contractions, I'd been working late. I'd is I'd had. So I had been working late, right? That's what I'd means. I had been working late. But you can just say I'd been working late, and people listening will know, oh, they said I'd, it means I had. We hadn't been gone long, means we had not been gone long, right? She'd not been taking her medicine, is she had not been taking her medicine. Now this last one, when you use the negative and you say she'd or he'd, when you combine the subject, right, and had, and then you say not, this one isn't as common in English anymore. It seems kind of like you're talking like from like the the 1800s or something. It sounds like it's how people used to talk, right? But it's still correct. It's still a correct way to say it. So if you do say it like this, it's not wrong. It's just kind of an older way to say it. So she'd not been taking her medicine is, it's just saying she had not been taking her medicine, which people say all the time. But when you say, oh, she'd not been taking her medicine, or he'd not been walking to school, it sounds kind of funny to people, to native English speakers, but it's still correct. So how to make questions. So to make a question, just like before, all we have to do is put had at the beginning of the sentence. So instead of saying she had been trying to call you right here, we say, had she been trying to call you? And it makes it a question. So they had been waiting for a long time. To make it a question, we put had at the beginning to say, had they been waiting for a long time? And that's how we make it a question. So just a quick lesson today. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you next time.